Hello, friends, and let's get started.
I've never considered myself paranoid. Life had taught me that trust was the foundation of any relationship, much less a marriage. With Olivia, it was exactly that: trust, respect, ease. We'd been married for 10 years, but every time her friend Phoebe was around, I felt a slight chill down my spine. She didn't do anything overt, but her presence always made me feel like I was a guest in my own marriage. Phoebe had come into my life with Olivia. They'd been friends since their college days, and their history seemed to have everything: shared trips, parties, even the shared apartment they'd once lived in. When I'd first started dating Olivia, Phoebe had been neutral, maybe even friendly. But when it came to getting married, her attitude changed. One day, I was sitting at my desk, going through old documents. I needed to find one important document, but my hand accidentally came across a box of our wedding stuff. Inside were bouquets of dried flowers, invitations, and ribbons that decorated the tables. I was about to close the box, but in the midst of it all, I discovered a wedding photo album. I hadn't looked at wedding pictures since our wedding, and we had been married for over 10 years. When I opened the album, I saw Olivia and I, a happy couple, glowing with joy. In the pictures, we were surrounded by friends, relatives, glasses filled with champagne. At one point, my gaze stopped on one of the photos. A group photo. Olivia and I are in the center. She's glowing with happiness, holding my hand. Around us are her friends. Phoebe stands among them, frowning. I took a closer look. Unlike the others, who were smiling and looking at the camera, Phoebe was looking at Olivia. And her expression was different from the others. It wasn't harsh, angry, but there was something different in her eyes. Something like contempt? Disappointment? I ran my finger over her face in the picture, as if I was trying to figure out what emotion was behind that look. Why was she displeased? Was it just a random grimace? Or did I really miss something? What did you find in there? Olivia's voice rang out. I flinched. She was standing in the doorway, wiping her hands with a towel. The pictures from our wedding, I answered, turning the album over to show her. She came closer, sat down next to me, and began flipping through the pages. Oh, it was a beautiful day, she smiled. Do you remember when Uncle George got drunk and tried to dance with my mom? I nodded, but my gaze fell back on her friend Phoebe. Look at Phoebe? I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Phoebe what? Olivia turned her head. Olivia frowned, quickly ran her eyes over the picture, and shrugged. Just caught up in the moment. You know she doesn't like the camera. I know for a fact that she doesn't like me, not the camera. Olivia grinned, but there was a slight tension in her eyes. Lucas, come on. She's just like that. A little harsh. But she respects us? I didn't say anything. Phoebe might be abrasive, but I certainly didn't feel respect. I closed the album, but the feeling of unease didn't go away. That picture seemed like something more than just a random moment. I wasn't looking for trouble. I'd never been one to suspect my wife of hidden agendas or try to find a catch where there wasn't one. But with each passing day, I found it harder and harder to ignore the tension that invariably appeared whenever Phoebe's name came up in conversation. After that picture in the album, I started to look at her differently. Before that, I'd just seen her as a slightly arrogant friend of my wife's, who was probably jealous of Olivia for our marriage. But now it seemed more complicated than that. Phoebe had always been extremely polite to me, but there was something more to her words. Her look, her smile that looked fake if you looked closely. Every word she said sounded like it carried a double meaning. But I wasn't sure if it was my paranoia or a real threat. One day Olivia was late for work, and I decided to stop for coffee at a small coffee shop near my house. I just gotten my latte and was about to walk out when I heard a familiar voice. Oh, you have no idea how much more he has ahead of him. I froze. It was Phoebe's voice. I slowly turned my head and saw her at a table in the far corner. She was sitting across from Hannah, one of Olivia's mutual friends. I pretended to look at my phone, but my ears caught every word. He has no idea, and he doesn't remember anything at all, Phoebe said, stirring her tea carelessly. Are you serious? Hannah asked quietly, glancing at her. Absolutely. But maybe it's better this way. I felt like I'd been electrocuted. I froze, still holding the phone in front of me, but alarm bells were ringing in my head. What were they talking about? Do you think this will ever come out? Hannah asked cautiously. Phoebe grinned and took a slow sip of tea. Secrets have a way of coming out at the worst possible moment. At that moment, I realized that if I stayed even a second longer, I might be spotted. I quickly turned around and walked out, feeling a cold sweat run down my back. What kind of secret was this? Who was it about? I got into the car, but I didn't turn on the ignition. I thought she was talking about me, but I couldn't prove it. But I knew in my gut that she was talking about me. A few days passed, but I couldn't get the conversation out of my head. When Olivia told me that Phoebe had once again organized dinner and was insisting that we come, I knew it was a trick. I knew this night was going to be a challenge. But refusing would mean openly admitting that I was avoiding her company. Phoebe said it would be a private evening, no strangers, Olivia explained, looking at me with a soft smile. She wants you to be there too. I looked at her more closely. She'd said that? Straightforwardly specified that it was me she wanted to see? Olivia looked slightly embarrassed, but nodded. Yes. Isn't that a good sign? I held back a chuckle. Phoebe never wanted me in her company. If she'd invited me, she must have had a reason, but I wasn't going to shy away. All right then, let's go. We got to the restaurant a little ahead of schedule. I parked the car and looked at Olivia. She looked gorgeous. The emerald dress emphasized her figure, her dark hair falling in waves over her shoulders. You look amazing, I said, giving her my hand. She smiled, but I thought there was a flicker of anxiety in her gaze. We walked into the restaurant. There was a subtle aroma of spices and red wine in the air. The interior was expensive but cozy. Dark wood, soft candlelight. I looked around. In the center of the room, at a long table, the guests were already seated. Laughter, glasses clinking. And among them, Phoebe. She looked up and looked straight at me. And there was a look of triumph in her gaze. I felt my insides tighten. We got closer, and then I noticed it. There were 8 people at the table, and all the seats were taken. I slowed down involuntarily. I counted again. 8 seats. 8 people. And there were 2 of us. My heart thudded in my chest. Olivia noticed too. I felt her hand tense slightly in mine. Phoebe stood up, her face lighting up with a fake, friendly smile. Lucas, Olivia, how wonderful of you to come. She hugged Olivia warmly and then turned to me. I waited for her next move. Oh, she stretched out, pretending she'd just noticed the problem. What an embarrassment. She swept her hand across the table, as if she'd just now realized there weren't enough seats. I think I made the wrong reservation. The table is for 8, and there are 9 of us. She looked at the waiter who was standing nearby. I think I could use an extra chair. The waiter hesitated slightly. I'm afraid, ma'am, that's not possible. There is limited seating in this area of the restaurant. Phoebe folded her arms across her chest, feigning innocent confusion. Oh well, this is awkward, Phoebe said with ostentatious regret. There was silence at the table. I glanced at the guests. Some of them averted their eyes, as if embarrassed to be part of the spectacle. Some of them, mostly men, were watching the situation unfold with interest. And one of Phoebe's friends, whom I crossed paths with, even grinned a little. But most importantly, Olivia. She looked helpless, but she didn't say anything. Not a word in my defense. I swallowed and looked straight into Phoebe's eyes. I guess I can just wait at the bar, I said in a flat voice. Phoebe shrugged, as if that was all she was waiting for. Well, if it makes you feel more comfortable, she said with a smirk on her face. I looked at Olivia again. I waited, waiting for her to say something, to object, offer to leave with me. But she just pressed her lips together. I could see how nervous she was. I saw her fingers trembling slightly on the glass stem of the glass. But she didn't do anything. I felt something break inside. Fine, I said, turning on my heels, and headed for the bar. The bartender put a glass of whiskey in front of me. Rough day? He asked, looking at me appraisingly. I grinned, took the glass, and took a big gulp. I sat like that for about 20 minutes. From the bar, I had a good view of the table where Olivia was sitting. She looked uncomfortable. Phoebe, on the other hand, was having a blast. She was laughing, talking, waving her arms around like an actress on stage. But every once in a while, her gaze slid back to me. Every time I met her eyes, she lifted the corner of her lips slightly, as if to say, "Look, Lucas, you're not needed here." I took another sip. Why the hell am I even sitting here? I finished the whiskey, set the glass on the bar, and stood up and headed back to their table. Phoebe arched an eyebrow, pretending to be genuinely surprised to see me. I kept my eyes on Olivia, ignoring Phoebe. Olivia, are you coming with me or staying here? She froze, as if the words caught her off guard. Lucas, let's not dash, she started quietly, but her voice shook. I took a step closer, clearly aware of the stares of the guests, who were frozen in anticipation. I'm not kidding. Are we leaving together? Or are you staying? I asked insistently. Phoebe put her elbows on the table, interlocked her fingers, and smirked. Jesus, Lucas, why the theater? She shook her head lazily. You're a grown man. Can't you just relax and sit at the bar? I ignored her. Olivia shifted her gaze from me to Phoebe. For one moment, I thought she looked like she was ready to get up. Her fingers twitched, like she wanted to reach for her purse. But then, she averted her eyes, like she was admitting that she wasn't going, that she wouldn't choose me. Phoebe grinned contentedly. That's it, Lucas. Sit down, have a drink, and tomorrow you'll laugh about this episode yourself. I looked at Olivia one last time. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but she didn't say a word. I turned and walked toward the exit, feeling dozens of stares. But only one stung me more than the others. It was Olivia's gaze. I didn't even have time to start the car before Olivia suddenly caught up with me and got into the car. We drove home in complete silence. Olivia sat next to me, arms crossed over her chest, staring out the window. Her body was tense, her fingers twitching nervously. I could feel her tension, but what killed me the most was the emptiness between us. I gripped the steering wheel tightly and tried to control my breathing, but everything was churning inside me. I could see her staying there at that damn table. I saw her doubts, and I was annoyed that she hadn't chosen me. The drive home took 20 minutes, but it felt like we'd been driving forever. When I turned off the engine, Olivia made a motion like she wanted to say something, but changed her mind. I silently got out of the car and headed for the house. A few seconds later, I heard the door slam, and her heels tapped on the floor. Lucas, I dashed. Her voice was warm, quiet. I turned around sharply. No, there will be no Lucas now unless you tell me the truth. She flinched, as if she hadn't expected this abruptness. I took a step toward her without averting my gaze. You knew Phoebe would do this. You saw that she was trying to humiliate me. You could have said a word, but you didn't. She pressed her lips together as if she didn't know what to say. Why, Olivia? Why did you let this happen? I dashed. Her gaze flickered. I just didn't want to make a scene. It was her dinner. Her dinner? I grinned, not believing my ears. You cared more about not ruining Phoebe's night than supporting your husband? What are you, Olivia? She clenched her jaw, but didn't say anything. I stepped closer, feeling the rage boiling inside me. Damn it, Olivia. Why are you afraid of her? I shouted. Her eyes darted to the side. Her breathing hitched. She opened her mouth, but couldn't get a word out. I waited, waiting for her to admit what I'd known for a long time. You don't understand. Her voice shook. Then explain what I don't understand. She swallowed, her shoulders slumping as if she were about to say something that physically hurt her to say. Phoebe, her voice almost trailed off. She knows something about the past. My eyebrows furrowed. She closed her eyes, as if gathering her wits. Then she said the words that explained everything. Phoebe had a crush on a guy in college. She slowly raised her eyes, and I saw fear in them. Real fear. She had been in love with a guy for a long time, secretly. Thought one day he'd notice her. And then Olivia stopped talking, biting her lip. And then my voice sounded hoarse. And then he rejected her. At the party, in front of everyone, I felt something inside me shake. And what? She froze, then exhaled. That guy was you, Lucas. You were the guy she loved. I took a step back as if she'd slapped me. Oh, come on now. That's impossible. I would remember. Olivia shook her head. You don't remember. Because you were drunk. I frantically tried to remember. College. The parties. The alcohol. Laughter. Vague faces. I couldn't remember if Phoebe was one of them. You were drunk, Lucas. And according to her, when she confessed her feelings to you, you laughed. You didn't even realize she meant it. I closed my eyes, trying to process what I was saying. And then you just walked off with another girl, laughing in her face. I slowly sank into the chair. My mind was all jumbled up. I looked at Olivia. You knew all this time, and you didn't tell me? She looked away. I didn't find out until after we started dating. Then why didn't you say anything? She looked at me, her eyes filling with tears. I thought it was in the past. I thought Phoebe would just get over it. I didn't know she was so vindictive and things would go this far. I shook my head, still not believing what I was hearing. Phoebe was getting revenge on me for something I don't even remember. She's destroying my marriage, manipulating me, humiliating me in front of Olivia. All because of a night I forgot. I felt a pang of anger wash over me. I got on my feet. I finally realized what I was dealing with. Phoebe didn't just hate me. She wanted to destroy me. I spent a few days in prolonged silence, pondering everything I'd learned. Olivia tiptoed around the house, avoiding my gaze. She tried to talk to me, but each time her words stuck in my throat, unable to get out. But I couldn't afford to just wait any longer. I could see that Phoebe wasn't going to stop. She was methodical, confident, knowing exactly where to hit to cause me maximum pain. She wanted to destroy my marriage. I didn't know exactly what she had planned next, but I was sure it wasn't over. That's when I realized it was time to stop being a victim. I found out about their new party by accident. Olivia was standing in the kitchen, leaning over her phone. Did something happen? I asked in an even voice. She flinched, as if she'd forgotten I was there. Phoebe invited us to dinner. I felt my insides tighten. And you're going to go? She rubbed her temple nervously. I don't know. I took a step closer. Where will it be? She looked up. At the Belmont. I froze. It was one of the most prestigious restaurants in town, and I knew the owner. I pulled out my cell phone and dialed the number. Richard, it's Lucas. Tell me, can you close the Belmont for a private party on Friday night? Richard laughed. Anything for you. But why? I explained briefly. So you want to teach a lesson then? That's a good one. He grinned. I want her to feel the way I felt. Consider the restaurant yours. I thanked him and hung up. Now we had to wait. We arrived on time that evening. Olivia looked wary, but didn't say anything. The restaurant was empty. Only a few waiters stood at the entrance, waiting for us. I escorted Olivia inside, sat her at the best table by the panoramic window, and poured her a glass of wine. She eyed me suspiciously. Lucas, what did you do? Before I could answer, they appeared in the doorway. Phoebe and her company. They walked confidently, laughing and talking. But as soon as they reached the receptionist's desk, their faces changed. I watched the scene with undisguised amusement. What do you mean the restaurant's closed? Phoebe frowned. The receptionist nodded politely. The restaurant is booked for a private event. Phoebe looked around the room, and her eyes met mine. I smiled. She froze, her fingers hooked into her clutch. I took a sip of wine and leaned back in my chair. Phoebe, what a surprise. Did something go wrong with you? She tensed, her back straightening. You did this? Scoundrel. Are you surprised? I asked with a grin through my teeth. Anger flashed in her eyes. It's a childish thing to do. Do you really think you're going to prove anything? I put the glass on the table. No, Phoebe. I'm just mirroring you. And you know what? I like it. Olivia sat next to me, not interfering, but I could feel her watching me. Phoebe pressed her lips together, her friends frozen in awkwardness, not knowing what to do. You're being petty, Lucas. She blurted out in a huff. I slowly rose to my feet. Petty? So when you humiliated me in front of Olivia, that wasn't petty? When you turned our life into a battlefield, that was okay, too? I took a step toward her and continued. You wanted me to feel like an outsider in your marriage. But it seems that now you feel like a stranger in this restaurant. I said with undisguised pleasure. She clenched her jaw with anger, and I could see that she realized she had lost. Olivia stood up. I turned to her, waiting for her reaction. She looked at Phoebe for a long moment, then at me. Phoebe swallowed, losing her swagger for the first time all evening, and turned to my wife. Olivia, tell him it's overkill. Olivia hesitated, but then her gaze hardened. She took a deep breath, as if making a final decision. Olivia shifted her gaze to Phoebe. You should leave. That was something I definitely hadn't expected. I saw Phoebe turn pale. Olivia, what are you doing? You don't understand. But my wife had already turned her back on her. That was the moment everything changed. Phoebe pressed her lips together, but said nothing more. She turned and walked out, her steps quick, but I could see she was seething inside. When the door closed behind her, Olivia sat back down and looked at me. You knew this was going to happen, didn't you? I met her gaze. I had hoped. She shook her head and grinned. That was a cruel thing to do. I shrugged my shoulders. It had been fair. Olivia took a sip of wine and looked out the window. There was no more doubt in her eyes, only understanding. This could all have ended at dinner at the Belmont. Phoebe left without another word, but I knew she wouldn't give up so easily. This type of person doesn't know how to lose. They can't stand it when someone breaks their script. So I wasn't surprised when 2 days later there was a persistent knock on the door of our house. I was in the living room, reading the news on my phone. Olivia was washing dishes in the kitchen when the knocking happened again, louder and more demanding. I got up then and went to the door. When I opened it, I saw Phoebe, and she didn't come alone. Standing next to her were two of her friends, Kate and Samantha, both with equally tense faces. Phoebe kept a straight face, but I could see her fingers trembling as she clutched the strap of her bag. Lucas. Her voice was cold, but there was tension in it. I didn't answer. I just stared at her, waiting for her to continue. Olivia appeared in the doorway behind me. She stopped, wiping her hands with a towel. What are you doing here, Phoebe? She asked calmly. Phoebe looked up at her. I came to talk to you, Olivia. I see you didn't come alone. Phoebe grinned, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. I didn't want to come alone. Sometimes you just need support. You know how it is, don't you? Her words sounded aggressive, but Olivia didn't flinch. I looked at my wife. She stood firm, her chin slightly forward. She'd hesitated in situations like this before, but not now. I knew this moment would be crucial. Olivia crossed her arms over her chest. I'm listening. Phoebe frowned. Do you really want to end it like this? Just throw our friendship away because of Dash? She nodded in my direction, not even bothering to call me by my name. Olivia tensed, but her voice remained steady. Not because of him. It was you. I saw Phoebe flinch. Olivia Dash. She took a step forward, but Olivia didn't move. You've got it all wrong. This whole thing is a theater Lucas put on. He just wanted to make me look like the villain, but you know that's not true. I laughed. Phoebe turned to me, her eyes flashing with anger. What's so funny? Asshole. You funny Dash. I folded my arms across my chest, looking at her with frank amusement. You really think you can rewrite history that easily? Olivia saw everything with her own eyes. I shifted my gaze to my wife. Olivia nodded. Yes, I've already made my choice. Phoebe swallowed hard. Kate and Samantha shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot. They clearly didn't like the situation. You don't understand what he's doing, Liv. Phoebe's voice became sharper, almost desperate. You're betraying me for him. Olivia exhaled. Phoebe, do you know what I've realized? I love Lucas, and all of our fights, our misunderstandings, our tense moments are all about you. Phoebe pressed her lips together. That's not true, she said grudgingly. It is true. I've always made excuses for you, always found explanations for why you act the way you do. But it was simpler than that. Olivia moved closer, so they were face to face. You just didn't want me to be happy without you. Phoebe recoiled sharply. How can you say that, Liv? Yes, because it's the truth. There was a heavy silence for a moment. Then Olivia walked to the door and said in a confident voice, Please leave. Phoebe blinked in bewilderment. What? I said go away. Now. You can't seriously? I can't. And I mean it. Phoebe looked at her friends, but they were in no hurry to interfere. Kate lowered her eyes. Samantha nervously tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Phoebe gritted her teeth and suddenly hissed. You're going to regret this. But Olivia didn't flinch. No, Phoebe. You're the one who's going to regret it. Because now you have no more power over me. Phoebe stood there for a few more seconds, as if she couldn't believe it was really over. Then she turned and walked out, slamming the door. Her friends followed in silence. The door closed. There was a deafening silence in the house. I looked at Olivia. She exhaled slowly, as if shedding the last of her weight. I stepped closer and asked, "Are you okay?" She looked up at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw real peace in her eyes. "Yeah, I am now." I put my arms around her. She clung to me and then whispered softly, "Thank you for not letting me lose you." I ran my hand through her hair, breathing in the familiar scent. We were free now, and we stood like that for a long time, enjoying the silence, the freedom, and each other. That was the end of my confrontation with her friend. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and comment. We'd love to discuss this story with you. See you in the next video.